Ladies and gentlemen, in times of uncertainty, when the road ahead seems unclear, we are called to trust God like never before. The journey may not always make sense, but His plans are always greater than our understanding. When we face uncertainty, one of the most challenging things to do is wait. We live in a world where instant results are often expected, and we are taught to make things happen on our own terms. But in times of uncertainty, God calls us to trust in His timing, not our own. His timing is always perfect, even when it doesn't align with our plans or our sense of urgency. There are moments in life when everything seems to be moving at a pace that we cannot control, and it feels like we're stuck in a waiting room watching time slip away. It's easy to become frustrated, to ask why things aren't moving faster or why we haven't received the answers we long for. In those moments, we have to remind ourselves that God sees what we cannot see. He understands the big picture, and His timing is woven into every detail of our lives. God doesn't operate on our timeline, and that's something we must come to terms with. His timing is not about waiting for the perfect moment according to our standards. It's about the moment that aligns with His purpose. Sometimes God allows us to go through seasons of waiting because He's preparing us for something greater than we can imagine. The delay doesn't mean denial. It means He's refining us, building our character, strengthening our faith, and shaping us into the people we need to be to handle the blessings He has in store for us. Consider the story of Joseph in the Bible. For years, he experienced betrayal, false accusations, and imprisonment. But through it all, he never lost sight of the fact that God had a plan for his life. When Joseph finally rose to a position of power in Egypt, it wasn't just about his success, it was about God's perfect timing. God knew the right moment to elevate him, to bring about the fulfillment of his dreams, and to use his life to save many others. The years of waiting and suffering were not wasted. They were part of God's divine plan. And Joseph's trust in God's timing ultimately led to his destiny. In our own lives, we must trust that God knows the perfect timing for our breakthroughs, for the opportunities that are coming our way, and for the answers to our prayers. When we surrender to His timing, we stop forcing things, stop trying to make things happen on our own, and start allowing Him to work in His way. We may not understand why things are moving so slowly, or why we haven't reached our desired destination yet. But we can trust that God is working behind the scenes in ways we cannot see. It's important to remember that waiting doesn't mean inactivity. While we wait, we are called to continue to seek God, continue to serve others, continue to grow, and continue to trust in the process. Our faith is strengthened in the waiting. Our patience grows, and we learn to rely more fully on God's wisdom rather than our own. We may not see the fruit of our waiting immediately, but we must trust that what God is doing is far greater than anything we could accomplish on our own timeline. Trusting in God's timing is a choice. It's a choice to let go of control, to release our worries, and to rest in the assurance that God is always working for our good. And when we do that, we can find peace in the uncertainty, knowing that the timing is in His hands. When we find ourselves in times of uncertainty, one of the most natural reactions is fear. Fear can flood our hearts and minds, convincing us that we are not in control, that the situation is too much to handle, or that things will never get better. Fear whispers that we are alone, that the challenges we face are insurmountable, and that we should be anxious about the future. But in those very moments, God calls us to make a different choice, a choice to rise above our fears and place our trust in Him. Faith is the antidote to fear. While fear magnifies the obstacles, faith shifts our focus to the one who is greater than any challenge. It reminds us that God is bigger than our problems and that He is with us through every trial. Faith allows us to see beyond the immediate difficulties and look to the promises God has made to us. It reminds us that He is a faithful God and His word is sure. When we choose faith over fear, we open ourselves to experience God's peace in ways we never thought possible. When we trust in God, we acknowledge that He holds our future. We may not know what lies ahead, but we can trust that He is already there, preparing a way for us. Fear often arises when we feel uncertain about what comes next, but faith in God brings us a sense of assurance that no matter what, we will never face it alone. The Apostle Paul reminds us in Scripture that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. This is the kind of faith that pushes back the darkness of fear and illuminates the path ahead. It's important to recognize that fear is not from God. God does not want us to be consumed by worry or anxiety. He doesn't want us to live in a constant state of tension, wondering what will happen next. Instead, He calls us to trust in His goodness, His sovereignty, and His perfect plan for our lives. When we take our eyes off the fear and place them on God's faithfulness, we begin to experience a peace that surpasses understanding. We can be confident that He is in control and that He is working everything out for our good, even when things don't look the way we expect. Faith doesn't deny the presence of fear. It acknowledges fear but chooses to trust God in spite of it. It's not about pretending everything is fine. When it's not, it's about knowing that even in the midst of uncertainty, God is bigger than our fears. Faith gives us the strength to press forward, even when we don't have all the answers. It empowers us to face the unknown with courage, knowing that God will provide for us every step of the way. Choosing faith over fear is a daily decision. It's a choice we make every time fear tries to creep into our hearts. It's a choice to stand firm on God's promises and to hold fast to the truth that He is with us, He is for us, and He will never leave us or forsake us. In the midst of uncertainty, we can choose faith, knowing that it will carry us through every storm and lead us to the victory God has prepared for us. In uncertain times, it's easy to become anxious about our needs. We might worry about our financial situation, our health, or the well-being of our loved ones. The pressure of trying to figure out how everything will work out can be overwhelming. But in these moments of uncertainty, God promises to provide for us. He doesn't just give us what we need when it's convenient or when we feel comfortable. He provides for us in His perfect time and in ways that often surprise us and exceed our expectations. God's provision isn't limited to just material things. While He certainly cares about our physical needs, His provision also encompasses emotional, spiritual, and relational support. Sometimes in times of uncertainty, the provision we need most isn't money or resources, but peace, comfort, and strength. God knows exactly what we need, and He is faithful to supply it. We may not always see how He's going to provide, but He's always working behind the scenes, orchestrating the perfect circumstances for us to experience His provision. Think about the Israelites in the wilderness. They had just been freed from slavery in Egypt, and they were walking through a desert with no visible means of support. There was no food, no water, no place to call home. Yet in the midst of their uncertainty, God miraculously provided for them. He sent manna from heaven to feed them, water from a rock to quench their thirst, and even protection from their enemies. In the wilderness, God didn't just provide for them in small ways, He provided abundantly. And even when they didn't know how it would happen, God's provision never failed. The Israelites had to trust God completely, knowing that He was their source and that He would never leave them without what they needed. In the same way, God promises to provide for us in every area of our lives. It may not always come in the way we expect or on the timeline we like, but His provision is always perfect. Sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we feel like we have nothing left, and we're tempted to think that God has forgotten us. But those are the very moments when God's provision shines the brightest. When we reach the end of our resources, that's when God steps in to show us that He is our ultimate source. Whether it's a sudden opportunity, a new connection, or unexpected help from someone, God's provision often comes in ways that are beyond our comprehension. Trusting in God's provision requires faith. It's trusting that God knows exactly what we need and when we need it. It's believing that he will always provide for us, even when it feels like there's no way forward. When we trust in God's provision, we shift our focus from our lack to his abundance. We stop worrying about how things will work out and begin to rest in the assurance that God is already taking care of us. He's not caught off guard by our circumstances. He's already ahead of us, working everything out for our good. God's provision isn't just about meeting our immediate needs. It's about showing us that we can rely on him in all things, trusting that he is faithful to provide for us today, tomorrow, and for the rest of our lives. When we trust him, we are opening ourselves up to experience the fullness of his provision spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Even in uncertain times, God's provision is steadfast, unwavering, and more than enough. When we walk through seasons of uncertainty, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the unknown. We don't always know what tomorrow will bring, and that can stir up feelings of fear, doubt, and insecurity. But the truth we must hold on to is that God holds our future in his hands. He sees the beginning from the end, and he is working everything out for our good, even when we can't fully understand it. Our future is not a mystery to him. It's part of his divine plan, and he has already prepared a way for us. Sometimes it can be hard to grasp this idea, especially when things aren't going as we plan. We tend to focus on the immediate struggles, the unanswered questions, and the uncertainty that looms ahead. It's in these moments that we must remind ourselves that God knows the plans he has for us. These are not plans to harm us, but plans to give us a hope and a future. He is actively shaping our future, guiding us toward the destiny he has prepared, and we can trust that he will never lead us astray. Think about the story of David. He was anointed to be king at a young age, but the path to his throne was not immediate. He spent years in uncertainty, running for his life, facing constant challenges, and enduring moments of despair. Yet through it all, God was with him. David didn't always understand why things were happening the way they were, but he trusted that God had a plan. And when the time was right, God established him as king. David's story is a powerful reminder that even when we can't see it, God is already preparing the future he has for us. His plans are unfolding in ways we can't always perceive, but we can trust that he is in control. It's natural to want to know what the future holds, to seek clarity about what's coming next, especially when we're faced with uncertainty. But God's invitation to us is to trust him with our future, to surrender our need for control, and to believe that he is leading us in the right direction. The future is not something we have to fear or obsess over. It's something we can entrust to God, knowing that he is already there, preparing us in the path ahead. When we surrender our future to God, we take the pressure off ourselves to have it all figured out. We stop worrying about whether we're making the right choices, whether we're on the right path, or whether we'll ever get where we want to go. Instead, we rest in the assurance that God holds the future. He is not only present in our current circumstances, but he is actively preparing us for what lies ahead. He is working behind the scenes, weaving everything together so that when the time is right, everything will fall into place according to his perfect plan. Trusting that God holds our future means we don't have to be consumed by what's next. We can let go of our anxiety and embrace the peace that comes from knowing that he has already gone before us. Whether we're facing challenges, feeling uncertain, or walking into the unknown, we can walk with confidence, knowing that our future is secure in God's hands. Hope is one of the most powerful forces in our lives. It's what keeps us moving forward when the road gets tough, what gives us the strength to press on when we feel like giving up. In times of uncertainty, hope becomes even more essential. When everything around us feels unstable, when we don't know what's coming next, hope in God can be the anchor that holds us steady. This kind of hope isn't based on what we can see or what we can control, but on the unshakable belief that God is faithful to his promises and that he will come through for us. Hope allows us to look beyond the present moment and see the potential of what's to come. It's easy to become consumed with what's right in front of us, the bills that need to be paid, the challenges at work, the health concerns, the relationships that seem strained. But when we choose to place our hope in God, we stop focusing on the temporary problems and start looking toward the eternal promises. God's word is full of promises that give us hope, promises of his provision, his guidance, his peace, and his love. These promises are not just wishful thinking. They are assurances from a God who is faithful and unchanging. Hope doesn't deny the reality of the situation we're facing. It doesn't pretend that everything is okay when it's not. But hope gives us the ability to see that even in our struggles, God is at work. Even when things don't look like they're going to turn around, hope reminds us that God has a purpose for everything we go through. Our present circumstances don't define our future. God does. Hope is the expectation that something good is on the horizon, even if we can't see it yet. It's the belief that God is still working, that he is still in control, and that he will bring good out of every situation. Sometimes hope requires patience. We may not see the results we're hoping for right away, and it can be tempting to lose heart in the waiting. But Scripture tells us that those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. Hope is not a passive thing. It's an active decision to trust God even when we don't have all the answers. As we wait for God's timing to unfold, our hope strengthens us, gives us courage, and helps us endure. We may not understand what God is doing, but we trust that he is working everything for our good. Hope also fuels our perseverance. When life gets hard and we feel like giving up, hope reminds us that there is more to our story. God's plan for us is greater than what we see right now. Even in the toughest times, we can hold on to the truth that our hope is not in circumstances, but in God, who is always faithful, always good, and always working on our behalf. Hope is what helps us keep going when we don't know what's ahead. It's the confidence that no matter how uncertain the road may seem, God is guiding us. And he will lead us to where we need to be. In the end, hope is not just a feeling, it's a choice. It's a choice to trust God, even when everything around us is uncertain. It's a choice to believe that the best is yet to come, because God is in control. When we keep our hope anchored in him, we can face any challenge with confidence, knowing that he is always working things out for our good. In times of uncertainty, when the world around us seems chaotic and our hearts feel unsettled, God offers us a peace that transcends understanding. It's a peace that doesn't depend on our circumstances, a peace that isn't shaken by the ups and downs of life. The peace of God is something deeper, something unshakable. It is a peace that comes from knowing that no matter what happens, God is in control. He is faithful and he is working for our good. In the midst of our uncertainty, we can rest in this peace because it comes from the one who holds all things together. This peace isn't something we can manufacture or find through our own efforts. It's not about making everything in our lives go perfectly or having all the answers. Rather, it's a peace that comes when we choose to trust God, even when we don't understand. When we let go of our need to control everything and surrender our worries and fears to him, he gives us peace that calms our souls. This peace doesn't eliminate the challenges we face, but it does give us the strength to face them with confidence and grace. We see this in the life of Jesus. When he was with his disciples, he promised them peace. Not as the world gives, but as only he can give. In John 14:27, he said, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid." These words were spoken to his disciples at a time when they were about to face incredible uncertainty when Jesus was preparing to go to the cross. Yet, he assured them that even in the darkest moments, his peace would remain with them. This same peace is available to us today, no matter what uncertainty we may be facing. God's peace isn't a fleeting emotion or a temporary feeling. It's a deep, abiding sense of tranquility that rests in our hearts when we place our trust in him. It's the assurance that no matter how the storms of life rage, God is with us. It's the calm that comes from knowing that we are held in the loving hands of a sovereign God who is greater than any fear or anxiety we may experience. When we choose to trust Him, we open ourselves to receive this peace, and it begins to guard our hearts and minds. We don't have to understand everything that is happening in our lives to experience God's peace. In fact, it's often in the midst of confusion and uncertainty that God's peace shines the brightest. When we are able to let go of our need to have all the answers, we make room for His peace to fill our hearts. It's in those moments of surrender that we begin to experience the kind of peace that only God can give, a peace that surpasses all understanding. The key is to continually turn to God in prayer, to cast our cares upon Him, and to trust that He is at work even when we can't see the full picture. As we do this, His peace will guard our hearts and minds, giving us the strength and courage to face whatever comes our way. In the midst of uncertainty, we can hold fast to the promise that God's peace is always available to us, and it will sustain us through every storm of life. Remember, when you trust God through the uncertainty, you're allowing Him to work in ways you can't even imagine. Keep faith, keep moving forward, and know that God is with you every step of the way. Thank you.